Hi everyone, and welcome to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I'm your host, Victor Broden, and with me in the studio today, I have Kaye Vassey, Senior Technical Animator, and James Baber, our pipeline developer. Thanks guys for coming out today. We have some cool stuff to show off, but to begin, I wanted to ask you, what do you do as a Senior Technical Animator here at Epic?
So I've been at Epic for a while. Senior Technical Animator is kind of a long title for rigging, any physics work, anything. If you've ever seen a Fortnite skin that has any sort of capes, dangling pouches, backpacks, anything like that, Technical Animation handles all that.
There you go.
Cool. And yeah, so I work on the pipeline team here at Epic, and what our team does is we make custom tools and deployments for the various digital content creation packages we use here at the studio, and so that's my job. Yeah.
And that leads us a little bit into why we're here today, right? Because
a little bit.
You have been working on a Send to Unreal sort of pipeline, right?
Yeah, so this is just a standalone add-on for Blender that streamlines the process of taking assets from Blender and putting them into Unreal.
Yeah, so just to elaborate too, so what we're sort of doing is, I mean, obviously James and I are huge fans of Blender, and we have been forever, and we're excited to see 2.8 come out and it sort of elevate itself as a tool. And so what we wanted to do was really sort of dig in and make it an absolutely viable tool for our internal use here and external use for you guys as well in the near future. But and we're sort of going to talk about the two sort of separate add-ons that are being constructed here. James and I have been really sort of handling a lot of that development, and he sort of has really been the pipeline Python code mastermind. He takes all of my chicken scratch and works it in with his genius. And so what we're really doing is hoping that we can get something nice and stable, and we don't have to fight those fights that all Blender users getting into Unreal have to fight. And hopefully we can smooth that out and get things out to the community. The first one that we're talking about today is Send to Unreal, as James said. And that's sort of I would call it sort of the foundation for a lot of the tools to come as this sort of progresses. And it is exactly what it says, Send to Unreal. So there's going to be 3, if not 4 streams coming where we really outline the entirety of what we've been developing over the last few months. But this is sort of the first piece. This is the major building block. This is the foundation. And so there's a lot of cool stuff to show you guys. And I'm going to let James get going.
Yeah.
Because clock's ticking. So demo time.
Okay, cool. So I'm just going to do a quick demo of sending this cube over, and then I'll kind of explain what's going on after that. So you can see here I have Blender on the left. We have Unreal on the right, and this is just the basic third-person blueprint. And so I'm going to hit Control-U, and I just exported this cube, and I sent it over to Unreal. So that's just the general idea of the tool. Is it can be as simple as hitting a single hotkey, and you can get your assets from Blender directly into Unreal. Now let me kind of dive into what's happening here. The tool is just it's just an add-on. So if you go to your user preferences and then under the pipeline tab, I just installed this add-on, Send to Unreal. There's no magic here as far as this is just Blender 2.81. We're in Unreal 4.242. I think is the version we're on.
Mm-hmm.
The important thing to note about Unreal is it has to be, for this tool to work, it has to be 4.23 or later, because that's where some of the Python features were added in. So it won't work with a later version of Unreal than 4.23. But if you have that, you have this installed, and then you do 3 things on your project, you should be good to go with this tool. So the things that I have is I have 2 plugins enabled. So if I go to my plugins tab here, and I just type in Python, you can see that I have the Python editor script plugin enabled. So just make sure that's enabled, and then you're going to go to the editor scripting utilities, and make sure that's enabled. And once you have those two plugins enabled, it's going to say you need to restart the engine for these changes to take effect. So just go ahead and restart it. Then the third thing you're going to need to do is you're going to need to go to your project settings. I'm going to pull this down here. Type in Python, and you'll see this option right here. It says Enable Remote Execution, and by default, that's going to be ticked off. You're going to want to tick that on, and basically what that's going to do is that's going to allow this add-on to send Python commands to the engine. So with that, you should be good to go. I like to do a fourth thing, and that is just in the editor preferences. If you type in CPU, I just uncheck that. It says use less CPU when in background. So basically the Unreal will only refresh when it's selected and your mouse is on it. What I like to do is uncheck that so that both of these are refreshing at the same time. And so if I send something over to Unreal, you just automatically see that update happen. So that's not necessary, but I like that just because it makes it a little smoother.
I wanted to jump in here at this point and just reiterate something that James said, which was the demo that you're seeing is Blender directly downloaded from the web, from their site. And UE4 is the commercially available version in the launcher that you should go and download. And I'm sure all of you have because you've been playing with UE4, right? So there is no smoke and mirrors here. This is just an add-on. And it's just using features that are available in the currently available version of the engine for y'all. So
yeah,
I just want to make that clear.
All those plugins ship with it. The only thing unique here is just this one add-on we have installed in Blender.
They were wondering if you could show it again, just because it was so quick.
Okay, yeah. So like, for instance, if I modify this and scale it, you can see that it updates it over there in the engine, or I can go here, say I bevel this, and you can see the asset updating in Unreal. So you can see it's a really nice way to work very rapidly between the two and just preview the stuff that's coming in and out of the engine. So that's just the basics of how it works. I have all of the preferences stuffed into the add-on preferences panel. So there's a basic tab and then there's an advanced tab. So the basic settings are set up to handle most cases where you'd want to send assets over, and then as we progress further in the stream, I'll demonstrate some more specific cases where you're going to need to play with some of these advanced add-ons, or settings, sorry. If you look here, you can see that we're importing materials, textures, animations. So if I was, say, to delete the material off this asset, and then like I uncheck materials, and then I don't know, just so you can see it. I export it. See, there's no materials coming in on this asset. So you know, those are pretty self-explanatory. It's just excluding stuff from the actual import. I'm going to turn that back on. The next big thing that you need to know is this file path. So you're probably wondering, so how does it know where to go on my computer and the directory structure and all that? So like I said, this is connecting to an open Unreal Editor instance. So it needs to be open, and it also needs to have those plugins enabled, or else it's gonna error out and it's gonna tell you I can't find an open editor instance. So you need to have Unreal open, and once it connects to that editor instance, it's basically going to import within the local path of that project. So you can see that everything inside your project exists in this content folder. So that's what the game folder is. So the game folder is the content folder. Everything below that is just these folders right here. So we're putting in an untitled category, untitled asset, and then if you look right over here, my object name is cube. So that's the name of my asset. So the name of my object is the name of my asset. Folder structure, if your folders don't exist, it'll just create those folders for you. So that's pretty simple. And pretty self-explanatory. There is this setting here. I'm going to touch on this later in the stream and kind of explain that. But I'm going to go ahead and open up another example file, and I'll talk about updating meshes in Unreal.
Before you do that, James, one thing to note as well is if you'll look in Blender in the UI right now under the scene collection, I assume that everyone in the stream has at least played with 2.8, so the changes to grouping, collections, layers, things like that is pretty important. And so we should touch on the fact that these collections that this add-on adds are where you put the objects and assets you want going to UE4. And it's pretty self-explanatory. Meshes, rigs, and extras. So I don't know if you want to go into that a little bit more.
That's a good point. Yeah, so basically how this tool works is you can see that I'm exporting this and it's importing a static mesh, or later I'm going to show you how I'm importing skeletal meshes and things like that. The tool infers a lot of that information based on how they are organized in these collections. So we have mesh, rig, and extras. So extras is not really for you guys. That's where we hide a lot of extra information that goes on in some of our other add-ons and other things. That's just an organizational thing. But the mesh and rig collections are important. So this is obviously a mesh, so I wanted to move this to the mesh collection. I'll show you if I had this in the scene collection and I have nothing over here, and I tried to export this, it's going to say you don't have the correct objects under the mesh and rig collections because it doesn't know what I'm trying to do. So you need to have the appropriate object types under the appropriate collection names. Yeah, so that's an excellent point. Also, this right here, I'm using a hotkey, and that's just because I went here and I just changed that shortcut. So by default, it doesn't have a hotkey, but I just mapped it to Control U because I like using the hotkey instead of the menu. Yeah, so I think we're good to go, and I'm going to move on to another example.
We had a few questions, if you don't mind.
Let's do it.
A couple of them.
Yeah.
They were curious in what format the static mesh is exported in.
So I've seen some discussion about this going forward, and to answer that question, it is using Fbx, but we are not necessarily saving a file per se to disk and then having to go to UE4 and import. We're sort of piping that data and the proper settings recipe for UE4, which is really where that's sort of the secret sauce of this whole thing. That's not really so secret, but that's sort of what we're piping to UE4. And then the Python plugins that James showed earlier, that's actually what's handling that import information. Now you'll see a little bit later, there was a little bit, we already sort of let the cat peek out of the bag a little bit with one of those options that mentioned Rigify. You'll sort of see that we do have the ability to pull up the import options for things coming into UE4, but in the simplest cases, such as just a Blender cube and a color change on a material and things like that, you can just send it directly, and we've sort of set those settings for the best case scenario for what we do here making games. And so that's sort of hopefully that answers the question, but ultimately it's Fbx. Like that's the transmission layer, I guess you would say.
Yeah, there's no magic. It's just Fbx import, export, and we're just speeding up that process that you would do manually and setting the correct settings for you so they work hand in hand.
Yeah.
Another thing that I also should mention is this doesn't matter for static meshes, but this add-on actually will set your unit scale. So this is important when you start moving into skeletal meshes and you're taking assets that were from the engine and you start putting them in Blender. Unreal's in centimeters, so we're just putting Blender in centimeters, and that way there's not going to be any abnormal scale factors when you pull in assets that were from Unreal.
Yeah, that was another question, if it has the appropriate scale. So 100 units in Blender would be 100 units in Unreal, right?
Yeah, that was one of the, that was probably the first thing that we tackled was let's figure out exactly what settings match the scale in Blender to UE4 and back and forth, so that we can really have like a complete ecosystem where it's not, and I using Blender on things like Fortnite and other projects here that I've worked on over the years, it's always a fight. Like I totally hear you guys when you're out there going, why does this come in all crazy? Why is this turned weird? Why doesn't this scale work? I was fighting the same things, and so we finally got it nailed down.
Yeah, so like you can see here that this is 0.3 meters, just in Blender. And then if I go and I export this over to Engine, and I pull this in, that's 0.3 meters. So yeah, so scale should be 1-to-1. Yeah, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was basically the U asset information. So when you import stuff into Unreal, it generates that U asset file. But we're re-importing an Fbx file onto our U asset, and it's like, so the stuff that I change in my U asset, is that going to get overwritten, or how does this tool handle that? So you can see here that I just have a modifier, and I'm just going to put this up here, and I'm going to export this, and let me just go in here and play. So you can see that these stairs here, so it has that simple collision, just that default collision on when you import meshes. But say I wanted to modify those settings. If I go over here and I go to the actual the mesh settings,
Details tab, just to the right.
Oh, yeah. So I go to here to the Details tab and set it from just the default to right here. So I set it to use complex collisions. So that's just an example of a property that I changed on the actual U asset. And so we have, this is working as we'd expect, or has those new collision settings. I'm going to go ahead and just modify the model again, and I'm going to hit Control U and export, and it's going to maintain those settings that I set, and it's not going to overwrite them back to.
Whoa.
Storm.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're up still.
No.
We're pushing out.
We're still. Chat's still up.
Are we still with you guys?
Can you check tornado warnings?
Yeah, just update them and let them know.
Yeah, I am. Oh, they can still hear us. Apparently, they can still hear us.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
So we're in a crazy weather situation right here at HQ. It's
Yeah.
like tornado warnings.
We
and
can
such,
actually hear
so-
the rain in the studio right
Yeah,
now.
it's pouring outside.
And this
so
is a soundproof.
If you
Okay,
see us
I think
dive,
we're back. I think we're back. All right, now we just need to get the PC back up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess it's just us without Blender right now.
Okay.
Do we have any
Yeah.
questions, or?
We have lots
Yeah,
of questions.
let's
So
talk to
let's
you
go through
guys.
them as our the demo PC here is restarting. Thanks for that. Kind of a little bit out of our control.
What you gonna do, right?
It's the first time for me anyway, sitting here and everything just went boom.
I kind of wondered if that was going to happen, given all the weather issues we had.
We need
But
a
you know what? Show goes on, right?
Oh. Yeah, hand me over that. All right. Have to boot this up again. So they're definitely wondering a lot around, animations, textures, sort of what level of support and sort of how many types of bridges
Yeah.
does the add-on support?
So here's what I'm going to say. We have more streams scheduled on the way. We're not trying to be cheeky with that or anything. It's just a lot to go over. There's a lot packed into this thing, and we can't fit it into one stream and then sort of just give it out. There are a lot of factors that play into that for a studio, and so we are handling animations, and you'll see a little taste of that in the demo. I will say that you guys did see the buzzword for that one option of Rigify, and there is support for it, and it does work. And we are going to be demoing that, hopefully, the sort of base level of that as it concerns the mannequin in the next stream. And so, yeah, we hear you. I will say that materials and lighting is something that we have not tackled with this add-on other than simple materials, would you say?
Yeah.
As far as like a material network and how that relates from Blender to Unreal, we have not gone there. So we're talking, you know, just sort of
Just
basic
basic
color.
FBX import export.
Yeah,
So anything you
yeah.
can do with that, you can do with this tool.
Absolutely.
And then just in general, just the appropriate settings for doing the thing you want to do, that's what this is helping with. But it's just FBX export import.
Yeah, and the thing that we are, the sort of impetus behind what we want to do with this is not only open this software up for absolutely professional use by people who can make it sing here internally and in the games industry in general, but especially with our engine, but also the community. We have a marketplace out there full of assets, and there are so many questions that I've gotten for years and years on the UDN about, like, you know, I'm doing my project. How do I use the mannequin? How do I use this weapon pack? How do I use this stuff that I just bought on the marketplace in Blender? And it was you know, fraught with issues. And so one of the things that we definitely want to do is say, like, hey, this is going to work for your marketplace assets. That's why we're starting simple. That's why we're starting with the mannequin. That's why we're sort of rolling things out to you guys in that order, in that way. I know it's a little bit of a different sort of path than we've taken in the past to sort of have multiple streams, but there's a lot of stuff packed in here, and it's really big, and we really want to do it justice instead of just kind of lobbing it over a fence and being like, figure it out. We really want to roll it out to you in the best way possible. And so that's sort of where our logic is. And it's still pouring rain, but we're back. So I'm going to turn it back over to James.
Sweet. Yeah. So in that last example, you know, we saw that we just modified a property on our imported U asset, and then we re-imported, and it kept our properties. Essentially. So that's basically how this would work. If you modify any U asset properties, it should respect those, and when you re-import, all it is just pulling in the new FBX data from Blender that you made. So with that, I'm going to go into some of these preferences in the add-on settings. So if we go over here to the Preferences tab. So we've covered all the basics here. And so we're going to go into the Advanced settings. And you'll see there's a few extra things in here. And there's a whole new section, Asset Validations. When this next example, I'm going to do an LOD import. And so if I wanted to import LODs, it's not going to let me import them unless I run some asset validations. And that's this asset validation that checks the LOD names. So when you are trying to import LODs into Unreal, it needs to have a naming convention. And you can see that we have, what I did here is I just added the default monkey head, and then I added two subdivisions to one of them, and that's just my LOD 0. And then I have this other one that's just the basic monkey, and so that would be our second level of detail. But the asset validations are there to let you know that if you have some like name that is going to err out on the engine side, so it's going to look like it exports fine from the tool, but on the engine's not going to know what to do with that, and you're going to get a bad import. Basically, it's just going to throw you an error and say that this object, Suzanne, law, whatever, does not follow the correct naming conventions.
Nice.
So that's just basically all those validations are there to help you as an user not make simple mistakes. So a lot of those are beneficial to just keep on so that you can just kind of validate some of the stuff you're doing before you send stuff over to engine. So yeah, with that, I have my meshes in the mesh collection, and then I'm just going to export this to Unreal. And I'm going to go over to that folder. And so you can see here, if I open this up, Let me pull this down. So if we take a look at our monkey that we just imported, it's on the auto LOD now. So this is LOD 0. And then if I take this down to LOD 1, you can see our LODs are coming in as we'd expect. So if you want to make your own custom LODs and not use just the auto-generate LODs feature in Unreal, you could totally make your custom ones in Blender and use this add-on to just send them over, modify, and whatever. So here, that's LODs. I'm going to go into some of the other validations. So I'm going to open up another example file, and I'm just going to do the materials and textures one. So I just have this basic cube here, and it has a material and it has a texture on it. So I'm going to show you these other two validations in the preferences. You go to Pipeline, Advanced, Asset Validations, and I'm going to check on both of these. And personally, I think that you should probably always have these checked on because this is just good practice. But it's going to check if your asset has any unused materials, and it's also going to check if you have bad texture references. So right now, it's fine. So if I hit Control U and send this over, you can see that we have our materials in Engine and stuff, and it looks good. I think by default, Fbx is just going to pull over your color and your normal maps, but nothing else is really going to be linked up. So if we wanted to, or let me demo how these validations are working. So if we had a, say, unused material in this, it's going to yell at us. So say I added another material here, and I'm just going to call this material blank. So obviously this material is not affecting the object here, but we still have another material slot. And so if I export this, it's going to say error mesh cube has an unused material blank. And so you could be like, oh, OK, and then I'll just go over here and I'll just remove my material, and then I can send it over and everything's fine. Another thing is the texture references. So right now I have I actually have this on, it's referencing an image, this Unreal logo. So I'm going to just delete that texture right there. And so right now the image data is still cached in Blender's data blocks. So it's going to export fine now. But if I was to, say, close Blender, it's going to clear out those data blocks, and then it's going to try to pull in the texture reference again. And when I pull it up and I open that project, you can see that we have this cube here. We have this cube here, and it has like a null texture reference. Now that's pretty obvious now, but say you were here and you're like just working like that, and you're like, I'm gonna send this over, and actually let me go back to the preferences and turn on those validations because that we restarted.
They were asking if it was possible to do custom asset validations.
Like write your own validations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
an awesome idea.
Yeah, that is a good idea. There's no support right now, but I think, like we said, that this tool is still under development, and we're adding features and fixing bugs and things like that. So a lot of that stuff might change, and that's a good idea. That maybe you could just put in your own custom little snippet of code that will validate something, and you can run it. So that's a good idea.
And I know the launch plans are also sort of, I mean, this is in development, right? So everything could change leading up to that. But they were wondering if it will be open source. Will they have access to the source code of the add-on?
So, as far as I know right now, the thing that we are working toward, assuming that we can make it happen at sort of a larger business level, is to make the add-on available somewhere. And obviously, I mean, in the spirit of open source, UE4 is open source, Blender is open source. I can't imagine that we wouldn't, at least have it open source, and you guys can have the Python code right in front of you. So.
And then they'd also be able to look at how we're doing the asset validations and
Yeah,
continue on
absolutely.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all that code's right there, just in the add-on.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Cool. So yeah, now that this is opened up, it's not necessarily obvious that this has a bad texture reference, but you know, if I send it over, it says material contains a missing image Unreal logo. So you can see that that validation is working. So the validations are just there really to help you with certain things like that can pop up, especially when you're pulling stuff off the marketplace and you have missing texture references or unused materials and things like that. This is just it's kind of a sanity check for you to keep you from having to deal with some of those situations. So I'm going to go over and we're going to move into skeletal meshes.
Now.
Yeah, so now we have the mannequin, and so I'm going to show you how you would handle, or how this tool handles skeletal mesh updates. So we're just back in this folder here, and all this is just all the add-on default settings. I'm going to hit Control U. And so it's going to import our mannequin. So you can see it imports it with a skeleton. It imports it as a a skeletal mesh, and then there's also those materials there. Yeah, like I said before, it knows how to do that because of the actual collections. So I just moved this, the rig to the rig collection, and I moved the mesh to the mesh collection. So if you put those in the right collections, it should know what to do. With that being said, if I had, say, my mesh hidden, it would do a skeleton-only import. Or if I moved the mesh outside of the collections and say just put it in the scene, it also is just going to just do a skeleton-only import. So I kind of like to work that way because I like to see the mesh and edit my animations, but just do updates on the animation if that's what I'm trying to do. So that's what I'm going to show you now is how we would do animations. So for this, I'm just going to go over here. I'm going to pull this up, and I'm going to go ahead and actually just switch this over to the dope sheet, and then I'm going to change this to the action editor.
Yeah.
And working with a limited screen space here, but I think y'all can see. But I'm just going to hit a key a rotation keyframe, and actually I'm just going to key all of these rotation, and then I'm just going to key this one. Let's say like frame 50. Here, we'll rotate it and then I'll key it. So we have this animation right here, right? So I'm just going to hit Control U, and let's see. What did that say? Okay, yeah, and so here is our animation it just imported. So it's called root action because if you look in the action editor, it is called root action. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to rename this. I'm going to rename this to, I'll do it leg raise. And then I'm going to create another action. So I'm going to create another action. I'll call it arm raise. And actually, I'm just going to go full screen here.
Maybe.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm gonna go full screen here. I'm just gonna pop over to the animation tab. I'm gonna change this to the nonlinear time editor, and then this I'm just gonna flip over to the action editor. So you can see that we have this arm raise animation, which we want to basically take all these keys. I'm gonna take all these keys. I'm gonna delete them. And then I'm going to go back to that arm raise. I'm going to key all the rotation. I'm going to go here. And then I'm going to go into the skeleton here. Let's see, grab this bone. and then I'm going to just rotate it like that. So you can see that we have this arm raise animation, and then I go to the leg raise, we have our leg raise animation. So we have two different animations, and both of these animations are both of them are stashed on this rig. So if we export this, so we have, let me go over to my preferences here. Go to these advanced. And so we are we're auto stashing these animations here. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of, and actually let me just pull this full screen again. So we have two animations on our character. We have the leg raise, which is the active one. So that would be the only one that would get exported. So it's basically just auto stashing your active animation. That's what that auto stash setting is doing. Now, if we wanted to export two animations, let's go to our arm raise. So now you can see the bottom track says leg raise, top one says arm raise. I'm going to push this down in the stack. So now we have arm raise and leg raise in our NLA stack. So I'm going to put this over to the side again. I'm just going to remove this old one because we renamed it anyways. I'm just going to hit Control U. And you can see that we imported our two different animations. Now, this is where we get into those extra validations. So I have some animation validations. And so right now, it says stash and mute all, and unmute all animations. So you can see this little mute setting here. So I could see a situation where you as an animator, you might have a bunch of animations on your asset, but maybe you only want to export one of them or just two of them or something like that. So you want to be able to mute those. So if you uncheck that option right there, you just have to manually make sure that that you have all your animations listed here and you don't have one active animation up here. So you have to just manually stash it. It will auto stash the top level animation when you have this option on, which is why that's the default. But if we go here, we just have two validations, so we can check if actions are muted. So if I just wanted to run that validation, you can see that I'm going to mute that animation, right? And I'm going to export, and it's going to say, error, you try to export this you're trying to export animation and one of your tracks is muted, is what it's saying. So if none of our tracks are muted, we can send them over, and there's not going to be an issue. And then also, if we wanted to, like I was saying, just export one of these animations, all we would need to do is just unmute the ones you want to export, and then in your preferences, if I can grab the preferences here, you would basically have your validations unchecked, and then you would also have your auto stashing unchecked, because that's also going to unmute everything for you. So you don't want to unmute them if you're trying to work with just one active animation. So right now, if you can see here, let me pull this over. Leg raise is the unmuted animation. Arm raise is muted. So if we hit Control U, and leg raise comes over, arm raise does not. Yeah, let's just go over here to leg raise. And I'm going to go to my layout. And yeah, I'll just kind of show you just it updating animation. So I'm going to take this, put it over on the side here. I'm going to make this a little bigger for you guys. So we have our leg animation here. And if I wanted to say, let's just modify this animation, and here I'm going to rotate this, add a rotation keyframe, Control U, and there it is.
Wow.
We can see our animation updating, and we're rapidly just adding keys, changing it. Or I didn't key that. Yeah, add a rotation, send it over, and then you can see that we're just rapidly changing this animation. So that's basically how importing skeletal meshes works. I mean, the mesh itself, you could go in here and just say we went into, let's just go into sculpt mode, and I'm gonna say tweak the shape of this guy's head. Just to kind of so you can see that there's some changes happening here. Yeah, so we have that. I'm going to send that over, and we don't have the mesh re-importing, so I'm just going to move that to the mesh. So now we're actually going to be updating both, right? So I'm going to send that over, and you can see, there the heads updated, but everything else is still staying intact. All of our UAsset data that we're modifying in the engine's not getting broken. So yeah, that's skeletal meshes. If we want to go over, and for this last one, I have animation updates, which is really just how can we update existing or overwrite just animation in the engine.
So while you're pulling that up, I wanna do just a little breather here between. So, y'all, like those bones, right? Like it's crazy because of the way Blender handles bones and LRAs and how they define joints with head, tail, bone length, roll, things like that. The demo that we're showing again is the foundational sort of base of what is being used and what we will be rolling out in the coming streams. So yeah, we are in no way saying that you should animate these joints based on the way that we're demoing this. This is a functionality as far as getting it to engine. It's coming. So it's coming.
Yeah, we have stuff to handle that. We just aren't going to dive into it now because we don't have another 3 hours. We have plenty. Yeah, we have plenty of time to cover what we have now. But yeah, like a lot of DCCs handle those rotation orientations differently, and so we have a solution that should generically just fix whatever rotation gets spit into the Blender. It'll fix it, and things should be fine. But that's for another stream.
Yeah.
So the next thing I'm going to cover is the importing onto the mannequin. So say we wanted to modify the mannequin's run. So what I did here is I pulled in the mannequin character's run animation, and I will show you here. Let me just change this to the dope sheet. And then I'm going to change to the action editor, and I'm going to scroll over here. You can see this is called third person run, right? And if we go over to the mannequin and we go to animations, we can see that we have this animation called third person run. So these two names are identical. So all we need to do is we need to import the animation onto on top of this. We want to trigger a re-import of this animation. But we don't want to lose all the other information because this is tied to the character blueprint and it has materials and all that stuff. So we just want to basically tell this add-on to import the animations to this folder, and we have the name so it'll overwrite. So if I go to the preferences, and what I did there is there's this feature called copy reference, and so it'll copy the internal reference of this this asset. I'm just interested in the folder, so I'll show you.
Yeah, let's run through that one more time once we get in here to the path.
Okay, yeah. So
just so we can show exactly where you're copying from.
Yeah, so I'm copying the reference here, and I could literally copy anything in this folder because what I'm going to do to this path is I'm just going to paste this in, and you can see it has this third person run. What this path is looking for is just a folder. So we're looking for game, mannequin, animations, because you can see content. We're in content folder, mannequin, animations, and then third person's there, and then that's what it's going to be named right there. So that's how that's going to work. So it's just going to overwrite that. Now there's two ways that you could do this. There is in the actual character, because we have the simple and we also have the advanced settings. So in the basic settings, what this does is it will go to this this mesh path, and it basically says I'm going to import my meshes here, but it also says if I'm doing an animation only import, I'm going to look inside this directory for the first thing that is _skeleton. So that works in this case because there's no other skeletons in this folder. But if need be, you can do a direct reference with this advanced option. You can take that on and you can copy a direct reference. You can copy this reference to the skeleton, paste that in. So that's the skeleton that we're going to import on.
I want to triple emphasize that what James just said. So if you do have a directory, much like a AAA game studio would, that might have multiple skeletons or multiple assets in it for whatever reason, and you don't specifically give it the skeleton asset, just to reiterate what James said, it's going to find the first thing it finds with _skeleton and try to import on that. So if your project is not set up clean, if you're doing a jam, if you're just working on a project or demoing some stuff, keep that in mind. I mean, my workflow, I would always, I'm just that detail person, so I would always be I want the direct path to the skeleton. I want no choice. That's how I like to work. But you guys can make that choice.
And also this allows you to separate where the mesh goes versus where the skeleton is, because say in your project you're reusing the same skeleton in this game, that one skeleton that you're using is in some arbitrary directory, but you want to put all your different character meshes somewhere else. You still need to just map to that skeleton, and then say that skeletal mesh U asset just goes somewhere else. So it doesn't have to be in the same folder as that skeleton. So that's another way you could use it. Is I want to put stuff here, put meshes here, but I want to map to some hero skeleton or something like that.
Right.
And so yeah, I put the mesh path in there. You don't have to do that now because we're not importing a mesh. But if we were importing a mesh, we would do that. So I'm just going to send this over. We haven't modified it yet. It's the exact same, but I'm just going to send this over real quick. So if we go here and hit Alt-P and just walk around, there's our mannequin run animation. So we just re-imported this. But let me go here. And I'm just going to, or is it control space? Yeah. I'm going to go here and I'm going to modify, actually, yeah, that. I'm going to modify the actual keyframes on this. So if I select, the arm here, select the arm here, and I'm just going to, delete the arm keyframes, and I'm just going to add a rotation keyframe here, and then let's just add do the same thing with this arm. So I'm going to delete these keyframes, and then I'm just going to rotate the arm up like that. So I'm not sure what this guy's doing, but that's our new animation.
I like it.
Looks amazing.
And so I'm just going to hit Control U, and so we just imported that, and then I'm just going to do is just hit Alt P, and you can see that's our new run animation. So yeah, I mean it's as simple as that. You just map to which skeleton you want to import on, and then where you want to send your animations. We're overriding that one animation U asset, which is tied to an animation state machine, but all that stuff is staying intact. We're just changing that Fbx information. So I think the only other thing, so I saw a comment about morph targets, and I can show you how to do that, and also that will show you the last setting that I'm going to show you, and that's it pops up the UI, the import UI. So if you have something really custom or advanced that you want to do, you can do that on your import. So I'm just going to do a new file here, and I'm going to delete. I'm just going to delete all this stuff and just this collection. I'm going to delete this collection here. So yeah, let me add a cube, and I want it to be like 2 meters. Yeah, so I want it to be like 2 meters tall, and I'm going to go over here to the actual shape keys. So my base shape, I'm just gonna say add 2 loops here, and then I'm just going to extrude this like that. One thing to note about when you're making shape, well, it's going to be fine with your shape keys, but when you import them as morph targets, don't have overlapping vertices. If they're in the same position on the import to Unreal, it might just merge those, and then it'll break your morph targets. So you don't, if you're having issues with that, you might check and make sure that you don't have overlapping vertices. So that's just my basis shape right there. I'm going to add another shape key here, and I'm just going to grab this up here and scale it. So if we tab back here and you just play with this value parameter, you can see there that's our shape key. So let's go back to this Untitled Asset folder. I'm going to delete the stuff we put in there earlier. Hey, actually delete this too. I'm going to go over to my preferences. So this is the other thing that I hadn't touched on yet, but I think this is the last. Well, actually, there's one other thing here. There is the smoothing options. So by default, it's face. So in your Fbx export settings in Blender, it gives you these 3 options. So if you need to change your smoothing options when you export from Blender, that's available in your advanced options. So if you need that, then I think you would know how to use that. So the other import settings right here, and this is kind of a catch-all because I have some of the basic things here that are automated, and then this launch Fbx import UI. If you can't do it with the tool, launch this and you probably can do it. So this is just going to launch those the import UI. It's going to launch the import UI the first time. The second time it will not. So if you're doing re-imports, it will not relaunch the UI. It'll just maintain the same settings you set originally. So that's kind of nice. So if I launch this Fbx import UI, and this, I'm going to move it over. You got to always remember to move your meshes over to the mesh collection. And I hit Control U. You can see it pops up the import UI here. So it's suspending that and popping up this thing. When you're doing morph targets, you want to import a skeletal mesh. You want to click this down to see the advanced or more of those options there, and then you want to check this option that says import morph targets. So if you just click import, it's going to say there's no bind pose on the skeleton, and that's just because that's a null skeleton, but you need it. And here is our shape key.
Nice.
So there's our shape key and engine, and say we're over here and we, oh, I want to change the shape of this to that's my new pose or something. You know, export over, and then here's my shape key value over here, or my morph targets in engine.
They were wondering about morph target animations.
Morph target. I mean, you can animate those parameters. I think Kaye probably could talk more to that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we should try it, right? We don't have anything in this demo for that, but as we get into the sort of Rigify and character sides of that, we'll definitely touch on it.
Neat. We definitely have a lot of questions still outstanding, and so if you were done with your presentation, no mind, we can.
Yeah, I think I'm good.
We're done. We're out.
All right, all right. See you all. Does the pipeline export process use the only deform bones option for exporting animations and armatures?
So is that in the Fbx settings that they're talking about, or
I'm not sure.
If you're basing it off the settings that we worked on, I never use only deform bones.
Yeah, I believe that was turned off.
Yeah, because
I would have to relook at what the exact setup is, but
yeah, I never use that as a workflow. I always do the entire skeleton, just because we're talking about UE4, and that is more. That option in the export is more informed by UE4 because of the way it deals with skeletons, and I like making sure that I'm updating the entire skeleton every time. So
yeah, what we did with the Fbx settings is we kind of were like, what are the most common or generic settings that we would need to do all this stuff, and then we just have those hard set to those values. I was tossing around the idea of just like we could expose some panel that has every single Fbx export option, and that could be in another panel that's just like Fbx export or something like that. But yeah, like if some of those settings are important, we can totally expose them, and it would work with the tool.
Cool. Does it work with a master scene that uses linked objects?
I haven't done any stuff with or tested out any of the linking stuff, but
yeah, good call. Yeah, we can.
I mean, that's more stuff
add that
to
to the
into.
list for sure. Yeah, we'll check it out.
And that's also why we're doing these streams, so that we can get a little bit of feedback and see what people are looking for.
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, the spirit of all this is open source, and so we're over here making a really cool tool for us to use inside HQ as well for all of our games. So yeah, that's a great idea. Cool.
Will it support Alembic?
So, like I said, right now we are using Fbx. Blender has several export options. Unreal doesn't have a ton of import options, so we have to use some format that is both going to work good with Blender and Unreal. So Fbx is the best one right now. If there's more Alembic support or different things like that, does Alembic support bones?
I'm not sure of the Alembic support. I know that we have used it in the past for internal projects for various things. Currently, and that's something that we can definitely look into on our side in the future, the near future, but keep in mind too that the one thing that we are trying to accomplish first with this is based on a lot of the UDN feedback that we've received for years, which is marketplace. I'm trying to do a project. I'm trying to do a game jam. I'm trying to just get something off the ground using Blender, very small studio, very small group. And I don't know why this mannequin is doing this, or I don't know why when I got this character off the marketplace that's based on the mannequin, it's doing this. And so those are really the things that we're going to hit first. I know there was some questions about hair and Alembic and things like that, and those will definitely, I'm going to actually turn this around too. I'm going to put some of this on you guys because, and I say this to a lot of groups that I talk to, when I get questions about some of the sort of more advanced things like using Alembic for hair or anything like that, we need to hear your voice. We need you guys to scream at the top of your lungs that you want us to handle that, so that we can then scream at the top of our lungs and get resources to handle it. Right now the loudest voices we have been hearing for years is marketplace and downloaded assets and things of that nature, and that's definitely what we're handling first and foremost to get all of our indies off the ground and get smaller studios, smaller teams. That's not to say the stuff that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks isn't going to solve your professional level work, because I believe it will, but that's kind of what we're answering first. But we will definitely put Alembic on our list and check into it and see what we need to do.
We should spin up a forum thread specifically for feedback and discussion around
Absolutely.
the tool.
Features.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we can separate that and then
Yeah.
keep each forum announcement post for each stream specifically regarding that stream, and then another one that's
Absolutely.
for generic across, just a tool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll get on this soon.
And the other thing too, I think one of the other reasons we've been doing this and we're here is because Epic, we want to have Blender as an option for our artists.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we're not going away. We're not going to vaporware.
There was a lot of questions around sort of moving materials from Blender into Unreal. They were mentioning like, oh, what about procedural Blender materials, and will it try to remake shaders like Datasmith? Could you talk a little bit about?
Yeah. So, yeah, I think I kind of touched on this, but I'll say it again. It's just your basic Fbx export import right now. So I mean, theoretically, we could remap those materials. If that was something that we did. Right now, it doesn't. It's just if you export, you say the principled shader with color in a normal map, that's what it's going to pull in, and that's the same thing that it's going to pull in when you export an FBX file and pull it in.
Yeah.
So there's no like shader node set up or anything that gets shared.
That's the other thing too, is I know that there's other developers out there who are working on some of that tech as far as lighting and shading goes, and rendering and the back and forth between DCC or Blender specifically and UE4, and that's not what we sort of set out to do with this at this stage. We are again handling the very basics of marketplace assets, in and out, animations, being able to animate a character, whether it's on the mannequin or it's your studio's rig and you want to get it, get animation on it. That's sort of where we're coming at this problem right now. So but I believe that tech is definitely growing, and that's going to be cool when it is just a push button one-to-one shader network.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I mean, just the fundamental process is you have information on the Blender side, you have information on the Unreal side. We can make them talk to each other with Python. Both of them have Python APIs to manipulate that information. So if you had, theoretically, if you had some kind of a mapping that was being sent over in Python and then rebuilt in the engine side, it's totally doable. It's just that's not there yet.
Yeah.
All right, moving over, you did mention lighting. Are there any plans to support light export from lighting? And I believe someone even mentioned camera.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely sort of the same answer we had before. Currently we're handling modeled assets,
mesh rig, yeah.
meshes, rigs, animations. Again, the things that were the loudest, the voices that were the loudest for the longest, is they're sort of the first customers that we're getting to with this. That's not to say that I would love to handle everything else, or I would love to see the community handle everything else. And so if we get to it, if they get to it, if we work together, however that materializes, my personal hope, and I think James too, my personal hope is that we have all that, but this tool right now that we're demoing is very much related, again, marketplace meshes, rigs, animation, in a very sort of prototyping, very quick turnaround sort of with those intentions.
Cool. Is the process of exporting empties to sockets in UE4 the same?
Empties to sockets.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. So creating an empty in Blender and then making it show up as a socket in UE4. that is a great thing to put on our list.
Okay.
Absolutely. Awesome. Yeah, no, that sounds, that is not something in my career here that I have had to deal with on any of the projects I've been on for Epic. Typically, we've always handled sockets in engine. And then, of course, with engine development that's going on, I'm sure you guys might have heard of Control Rig and Virtual Bones and things like that. You know, it can be handled in different ways there. Blueprint offsets things for spawning to a socket or emitting from a socket. But that said, obviously there's a million ways to handle the same problem. And so I think that's a great item to add is how do we handle empties to sockets and things. That's cool.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Let's see here. Are the all the changes to the add-on settings saved between Blender starts?
Yeah. So so those are just stashed in the window manager property. So that should be saved when you save your blend file. Your preferences in your add-on will be saved to that blend file.
Okay.
If you open a new blend file, I think it's just going to be your default. Yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, that was another question as well, how to do it between blend files. Is there a limit to how many objects you can export live through the plugin?
No, so you can do multiple objects. So if I had, so right now I have.
Let's try and break it.
Yeah, let's.
Let's keep going with questions, and we'll just try and break it. How about that? Because that's cool.
Yeah, and I'm just going to delete this. Let's add a cube. And I'm going to add a not a circle, a sphere. I'm just going to move it. But I'm going to move both of these into the mesh collection and then export them. And we did have that option. Actually, I'm going to turn that off.
And I think the question too was like how many is too many to run through this, right?
The limitation would just be with. I mean, if you can do it in a single FBX file, you can do it with this. It's just FBX.
So it's
We're not going to
hardware.
guarantee any processing time, like bring over millions of objects in seconds. Like that's not happening, but you know.
Yeah, they were also asking like how quick is 100,000 polys, but it would basically be the same amount of time it takes to export that.
If it's an
Blender.
FBX, yeah, that really becomes like an engine question, right? Which is how fast can you E4 import an FBX with that much data?
It's just writing from Blender and then rewriting to Unreal. So however fast you can do that, that's how fast it's going to be.
It's API to API, right? Like Python to Python. So
yeah, and so there's multiple. So the naming though, it's going to name it with the first object. So that is one thing to note.
Cube
and cube sphere. Can we use the reimport function in U4 for an asset, or can it only be initiated from Blender as a push?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
So if you
the
modify
reimport asset.
Yeah, if you modify the mesh in Blender, save and then reimport, if that works the other way, so that you can actually reimport from Unreal rather than pushing from Blender, you would still have to export, right?
I mean, if you saved, if you did something to the FBX and wrote it out to disk, yeah, sure, you could easily point your asset. You could point your asset file path to the one that you saved out. But I think you're more pointing out like if the asset comes from Blender and then you want to re-import it, you know, I mean, I have not personally tested that just because it hasn't come up in all of my tests in production. But that's totally valid. That's a valid thing to try.
So they want to write it to an arbitrary path on disk, or?
Well, it'd be more like after you sent these two, that sphere that's right there, if you right-click that sphere and hit re-import, the right-click re-import options.
Oh, yeah, that should work. Yeah.
Yeah. James says yeah.
Yeah, so you just re-import.
Yeah. So that data is getting cached.
Yeah, so it's getting cached in your app data folder.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Someone just wanted clarification. The the tool works in 4.2.3 and onwards, right? Due to the Python.
Yeah, so that at the beginning when I was going into your project settings and there's that remote execution option, that's not going to be in Unreal until 4.2.3 and later.
Cool. Strike that one off the list. How does the import handle object origins? Does it still use the scene origin, or can it handle moving the origin to object?
It uses the scene origin. So like that cube is off, or actually no, this comes in as a separate mesh, so this will actually be, I take that back. Or no, actually no, it is the scene origin.
Yeah.
Scene origin.
Yeah.
So there is an offset.
There were some more questions regarding rig bone orientation between Blender and Unreal, and we touched on that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so rig bone orientation. That's going to get handled. The next part of this sort of, you know, once the foundation to our house is laid, which is really what this Sent to Unreal add-on is. And you saw, again, I'll throw the name out there. And it's not, you know, anything that we're sort of still working on, but we will have a sort of Unreal to Rigify ability that does work, and I've been using it a lot. And so, yeah, you will not have to worry about all those crazy joints sticking out of the mannequin, or any other character, like, I don't know, maybe a Paragon character. You won't have to worry about any of that when you are doing your animations. You will have the power of Rigify. And so, just sneak peek. Yeah, that is happening. And also, James and I have worked really hard to sort of also have the ability that, you know, if you have a studio rig with your character and you are happy with it and you don't use Rigify, it's okay. We got you. And so, again, I know it sucks to draw this stuff out like we're doing it, but there's only so much time in a schedule, and there's only so many Blender streams that we can do as a studio, and so we are doing our best to get it to you as quickly as we can, information-wise, and then we'll talk about it as we get there.
They were wondering if the streams will sort of act as the documentation, or if there will be any accompanying documentation with it as well.
Yeah, so
I hope there's documentation.
Yeah, we'd have some written documentation with this at minimum, and then hopefully we can make some videos and things like that. So.
Yeah, totally.
Maybe a tips and tricks tutorial, which is a little bit more like
absolutely
snap, this. Yeah.
I mean, right now, the as add-ons go that I've played with, and I've used Blender since 99, 2000 ish, so I've been around it. And on multiple platforms, and this add-on, you know, James and I have really worked hard to make it as robust as you need it, but not force you into a robust workflow if you don't. And so it's literally a few clicks, or if you want it to be 500 clicks, you can do that too. So we're trying to cover a lot of bases.
Another one of those bases are collision, and they were wondering if you add custom collision by hand, if that will import like it does.
Yeah, so right now there's no support for collisions, but we could add that to the list.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome idea. Keep them coming.
Well, we got more.
Perfect.
Take that one off the list. They were definitely now talking a little bit about the option of having a object origin being exported rather than seen. Is that something that might be possible?
Yeah, I mean, it would be the same thing as like when you use your Fbx settings, you say export selection as opposed to export all. The selection is just going to go to the selection's origin. So we could have an option that's just like, object origins versus scene origins or something.
Root animation was always a problem for me. Is root animation working?
It should be, as far as I've tested.
Okay.
We will make sure that it is obviously ship shape, but yeah.
Let's see, we asked that one.
And honestly, guys, James and I are super excited to show you the other stuff. Like, we really want to show you the other stuff, and so I'm like chomping at the bit to do it. But
We got 10 minutes left.
I know. So,
But that's why we're doing, and I guess we can double down on the fact that we're actually going to do several of these. It will be the first Thursday of every month, and so first Thursday of March, we'll be back in studio talking about Blender again.
that will be your
Tune in, yeah.
few click mannequin solution.
Yeah.
Yep.
Let's see. What about NLA setups with multiple rigs, where constraints are between different skeletal meshes?
That's an interesting case. I'd have to test that. But
Yeah.
right now it will go through and it'll export any amount of rigs that are in the rig collection. So it'll go through all of them. I haven't really done any tests with multiple character import, so we could test that.
That question sounds like it's coming from a more cinematic, like animation production standpoint than games, and so that's an area that I hope that we will step into. But right now, we've definitely been focusing on the sort of game asset back and forth, So, but I could be totally wrong as well, because that's happened plenty. But it sounds like that's more of like a two characters animated handing a coffee cup off to each other or something like that, and so or on the back of another character or something, and so we can definitely sort of jump into that arena when the time comes.
Does it handle bone IKs? And there's a note here that says Blender uses bone's head as target, U4 uses tail.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's probably a K question.
Yeah. So that's going to get handled with the way that we are sort of marrying ourselves to Rigify in as a choice. And so, in a custom rig situation, if your rig is handling IK, then you can have that IK translate over to the mannequin or whatever other character you've got there. But yeah, we are completely IK compatible. As far as
like we would just have to build that relationship in the engine with the actual asset in Blender, right?
Right.
So as long as that's there, then it should just be updating the information. But
Yeah.
it's not like if you had a rig and you made IKs in Blender that boom, you're gonna have IKs in Unreal.
Yeah.
You'd have to set those up.
Yeah, and that's that one-to-one between a DCC IK setup versus the engine IK setup from a professional standpoint. Whenever I've done a rig for anything like Fortnite where I am setting up IK to achieve an effect on a character that may or may not have had IK in Maya, I always just go to engine and set it up there and rely on it there without trying to make 100% sure there's a one-to-one. For most of the production experience that I personally have had, the delivery of bones and weights is really what is coming out of that DCC app. Bones, weights, animation, as far as a technical animation standpoint for rigging. And so any IK that was set up in Maya that may or may not have been touched by animators, if you're animating it in Maya, like, an IK leg, and you're going to have a target somewhere, that's all going to be engine side, moving the IK relationship around.
What about smoothing groups? What's the best approach?
That's just a case-by-case basis. I mean, I'm not by any means like a modeler or here at Epic, but you have your regular Fbx smoothing options here. So if you in Blender were shading by your edges or you're shading by faces, you can or smoothing by edges or smoothing by faces, you could use those export options there. And then also when you export, if you launched the import UI, I'll just show this real quick. If you actually launch that export UI when you send these over, you have some options as far as your mesh, as far as your normal import method, and then there's you can compute your normals by tangents or generation method. So yeah, anything that you'd be doing normally, you can do with this, because it has all the mesh options, which are really just the smoothing, and then you have all your import options there.
See, I got, I think, 2 more questions, and then
Cool.
we're going to wrap this up. They were just curious if it will ever support particles from Blender to Unreal.
I mean, that'd be cool. Be loud about it. Give us in the studio a reason to support that, and it'll happen. That'd be cool, though. I'm down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think the last one that we're going to have to touch on, because it has been repeated probably 20 times.
1,000 times. What are we doing? What is it?
When are we planning to release the tool?
Okay, so I don't want to say it's a sensitive topic, because it's not, but there is a lot of things that have to sort of fall into place for a company as awesome as Epic to get open source out to you guys. So right now, as of today, this minute, the plan is, yes, you will have these add-ons. The time frame, I am not going to pick that hill and give you guys a specific time, but in the broad sense, I would say this year, and I wish I could give you like a specific date, but we are definitely going to get through these streams and some of the events we have coming up before we release it to you guys. And there are a lot of sort of business reasons and a lot of good reasons for that. So yeah, I wish all of it was available right now, because using it every day like I have been for the past few months is just amazing after trying to solve this problem for so long. And I just, please be patient with us. I know this is odd to sort of hold it back from you guys, and I know it sucks, but we are on it. The plan is, yes, to give it to you, and we want to make sure that it's the best when that happens. And I was doing Blender streams when I started at this company, and I'm still doing Blender streams, so we're not going anywhere. And yeah.
I think the way they can really help that is just tune into the upcoming streams,
Yeah.
and just make some noise on social media, and just kind of let us know your interest level, and
Absolutely.
That's going to drive a lot of what we're doing here.
Those social media numbers matter. They really do. So the louder you guys are, the better chance we're going to be crunching on this thing.
And there's no better place than the survey for the live stream, which I believe Amanda
yeah.
just linked in chat. Go ahead and let us know what you thought of today's stream, what we did, and what we'd like to see in the future. I expect to see a lot of Blender in that comment, but do know that we're already planned another couple of streams specifically for this topic with Kaye and James here. Thank you guys so much for coming out in studio. This is exciting.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm so happy to show you guys this. This has been, like I said, this has been a crazy dream come true to get this working and have artists internally here at the company using Blender for AAA assets that you guys are playing in our games right now. And wow, it's awesome. I'm super happy.
Yeah,
James?
thanks for having me. Looking forward to the next one.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you guys.
We'll put it on the books. As always, we transcribe all of the live streams, and so in case you have difficult time hearing what's being said, or if you're not entirely sure by the technical jargon that we're speaking here, in a couple of days after each stream, there will be a transcript that you can download, or just hit the caption button on YouTube. But if there was something specific during the stream that you either heard or you were curious about if we were discussing, you can go ahead and download that actual text file, search for it, and the timestamp will be next to all the keywords that you're looking for. I mentioned the survey. Make sure you fill that out. Let us know how we did. We do a little t-shirt raffle if you provide your email address with it. And as always, go ahead and make sure that you check out our meetup groups if there are any in your area. I know they would all love to see you appear and show off what you're working on. We're working on a little bit of a new revamp of that, so stay tuned for some new fresh pages for your local meetup groups. So always make sure you visit our forums, the unofficial Unreal Slackers Discord, our Facebook, Reddit. We're all over the place. You know where to find us. Let us know what you're working on. The release channel on the forum is a good place. That's usually where we find our weekly spotlights that we have at the beginning of the stream. And that reminds me that I should mention that we are still looking for more countdown videos, which is 30 minutes of development sped up to 5 minutes. Send that to us together with your logo separately, and then we composite that together into the 5-minute countdown that we do at the beginning of the stream. It's a nice little placement to do, you know, a little bit of promotion for your game or your project. Could be anything. Make sure that if you stream on Twitch, not Twitch. Maybe that's something
Wrong
else.
site.
Wrong
Yeah,
site,
no, that's not it.
Is that another? Okay, never mind.
Yeah, never mind.
Make sure you use the Unreal Engine category so that we can tune in, or anyone else excited about what you're working on. And special thanks again to Kaye and James for coming out. We all three will see you all in just about 1 month. So until then, I should mention what we're doing on the stream next week. I know you all are probably excited about Blender, but next week Michael Nolan would be here talking about game jam tips and tricks, since he's sort of one of our internal game jam wizards.
Cool.
Yes.
Also cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'll both be, I think we're both doing Train Jam. I know we both did Global Game Jam.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's cool stuff. All right, with that said, thank you guys so much for coming again. I hope you had a good stream, everyone. Take care for the rest of the week, and we'll see you all again next Thursday. Bye, everyone.
Bye.